Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here in the Treehouse. Before we start our discussion of this week's entry into the Positive Masculinity playlist, I wanted to tell you to check out the show notes for the list of sources we use in this episode, as well as a list of content warnings. If you'd like to connect with us or share ideas for future episodes, find us on Instagram and Facebook at A Safe Place for Boys, or email us at safeplaceforboys@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, and enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, let's be snakes.
Great. You know who's great at karate? A creature that doesn't have arms or legs.
Yeah, they're the best, in fact. We're trying to emulate them. Cut off your arms and legs now, then you'll be perfect at karate.
Do it, child.
Don't feel pain or weakness, though.
Do it, 8-year-old. Welcome to A Safe Place for Boys, compassionate conversations about masculinity in media. I am your host, Kelcee Sykes, and with me as always is the All-Valley Under-18 Karate Tournament champion, Dr. Spencer Todd Bennington, PhD. How are you, Spencer?
Well, really a champion in my heart, but not on paper, unfortunately. I never walked away from any mixed martial arts or unmixed martial arts tournaments with the big trophy, the grand medal. I did win one match one time because the guy didn't understand that you weren't supposed to punch people in the face, and he did that to me a couple times, and I won because of some penalties. So that was good. I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah. And I gotta say,
you really are just like Rocky for real.
Just like Rocky, just like Daniel LaRusso, just like Johnny. I don't know if I can be just like both of them. I guess so. I guess that's the whole bit. But yeah, I haven't gotten punched in the face today, so I'm pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that you are pretty similar to both Daniel LaRusso and Johnny, whatever his last name
Lawrence.
is, Johnny Lawrence, in that you also do not practice karate regularly. But that is a hot take.
Yeah.
And that is not what we are here to do. What are we here to do this week, Spencer?
We are here today to strike first, strike hard, no mercy, Kelcee!
Are we?
No, we're not talking about Cobra Kai. I mean, maybe a little bit.
We will be a little bit.
But we are talking about the great gem from 1984? The Karate Kid. The one with Ralph Macchio and Pat Morita.
Yes.
The Karate Kid.
The definitive Karate Kid. I think the second Karate Kid is just fine.
You mean Part 2, Karate Kid Part 2, starring Ralph Macchio and Pat Morita?
Yes. The Karate Kid Part 2 is also just fine. Karate Kid Part 3 is very bad.
That one's pretty
bad.
bad.
The next Karate Kid is also pretty good.
Did you watch that one?
Yeah.
The Hilary Swank one?
Yeah.
I couldn't remember if we
Because
watched
that's
that
the one where he makes her launch herself from the top of one sharp, pointy rock to the top of another sharp, pointy rock.
Yeah, because
and she
one rock
falls on her face a bunch of times, and I was like, she's gonna break her neck, just like she does in the other movie where she does martial arts and breaks her neck.
Wait, what is that?
Isn't
She's
that...
not in $1 Million Baby.
I thought that was Hilary Swank.
Was it? I thought that was like, I don't think that's Hilary Swank. I mean, that's a funny little spoiler joke.
Holds.
You look that up and I'll tell you. I have a bit. Because, see, she's jumping from one pointy rock to the other pointy rock because the big rock represents Japan and the small rock represents Okinawa, formerly the Ryukyu Islands, which is where Miyagi is from. And when you know it, that in my childhood home, there was this old, stone fireplace. On either side of this fireplace were these big, flat boulder rocks, and I sure as crap jumped from one to the other, practicing flying sidekicks, thinking that I was leaping from Japan to Okinawa. And I thought that was pretty cool. So I guess I'm like Hilary Swank, too.
Yeah.
I'm like all the Karate Kiddos except for Jaden Smith, because he does Kung Fu.
Hopefully you are not too much like Hilary Swank, though, because I am correct.
Oh, no! She's a $1 Million Baby?
Not only was she in $1 Million Baby, she won an Oscar for being in $1 Million Baby.
Well,
and that character does break her neck.
Yeah. Don't worry, I've never been worth $1 million.
Well... That's a shame. But you know what? You don't need to be worth $1 million because it's not how much money you have. It's what's inside that counts. And also, how good can you kick a person with just one leg?
That's true. Yes.
Because the main character of The Karate Kid is just a good old, I was going to say small town boy, but I don't know that Newark is that small a town.
Not really.
Just a nice Italian boy from the great American city of Newark, New Jersey. And that is where this movie opens. We see simply the most Italian mother and son to ever grace the planet, packing up their car and preparing to move all the way across the country to California.
Tell your Uncle Louie that I left the red wine and the Parmesan in the fridge.
Yeah, it's literally what she says.
Oh, I know.
To the neighborhood kids as they're driving out of their old, apartment parking lot. It's just like, tell your uncle I left the wine in the fridge with the Parmesan. Now, listeners, this will not be the first or this will not be the last time in this movie that we encounter ethnic stereotypes. But it is the funniest.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
It's pretty good to be like, how do we establish in the opening shot of this movie the heritage of these characters? I know, we'll have them talk about the Parmesan.
Also, just real quick, this doesn't matter, but they're moving across the country from New Jersey to California. What fridge is left? Presumably she sold her home or apartment or condo or whatever. Did she leave the wine? Well, also, why are you putting red wine in the fridge? That's gross. Red wine and the Parmesan in Uncle Louie's fridge? In which case, wouldn't he notice? I don't understand.
Well, the thing is that they are, in fact, moving across the country with almost nothing.
Yeah.
They're driving a station wagon. His bike is on the top, and then they have, one box in the back that seems to pretty much only have a laundry basket in it. They have left all of their possessions behind, and the apartment that they move into is furnished. So maybe the old wherever they lived before was just owned by a family member. And
yeah,
so
I was about to say they probably lived with Uncle Louie.
Presumably. So we see them driving away. All the Italian children in the neighborhood wave them goodbye, and they start off on the first, fully 5 minutes of this movie, which is just a montage of, Americana as they are driving this terrible car that doesn't really work all the way across the country. The son, who is named Daniel, is not excited to be moving all the way across the country. But his mom is like, oh, don't worry. You're gonna feel better when every morning you roll out of bed directly into a pool, which I guess is a thing that all Californians are legally mandated to do. But he's not really convinced, and he only becomes less convinced when they pull into the parking lot of their new apartment complex. And the pool is not even filled in, and it's full of garbage, and it's not an impressive building, this apartment complex. And Daniel shows that he has no respect for it as he's carrying their one box of possessions into the building, which again doesn't appear to have anything in it, so it can't possibly be that heavy. But he won't put it down to open up the gate. He instead kicks the gate open with his full force.
Oh yeah. Hi-ya! He says.
And it does open directly into the face of one Freddie Fernandez, who is another boy from the complex, who picks up on two things right away, which is, one, why did you guys move here from New Jersey? Because he already knows that for some reason. And Daniel is like, oh, my mom got a new job in computers, which is the most we ever learn about
rocket
her
computers.
Job.
Supposed to really be taken off or something. There's a little pun there.
Yeah. Something, it's the 1980s computing. Something big is going on. You got to be in Reseda for it, I guess. The famous part of California with all the computer stuff in it, Reseda?
I assume that her job is not in Reseda, but that is just where they can afford to live.
It could be. I don't know enough about the geography of California to know,
I don't either.
Anything about Reseda, really. So, no offense to Reseda. I'm sure it's beautiful there.
It's just what we know from this film, which is that Reseda is, by contrast, the poor neighborhood that is established, not the hills.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Encino.
Oh.
Encino and Reseda are the two locations.
If you say so.
I say so.
I'll believe you. Again, I know nothing about California.
I don't know anything about it either, other than you can look that up because I've got a dang good karate memory.
That's great. You know who else has a great karate memory is Freddie Fernandez, because he saw Daniel do one big kick and was like, "Are you into karate?"
What, you know karate or something?
I guess being able to do one kick while saying the words "hi-ya" qualifies you as a karate master.
Yeah, specifically the hi-ya, I think, is where he got him. He sold him.
But Freddie is apparently impressed enough with Daniel's moves that he learned down at the local Y back home in Newark that he's like, "Hey, you're pretty all right. You should come to a party on the beach with me, because it's California."
They're saying goodbye to summer.
Yeah.
It's the last beach party before the school season starts.
I mean, that's probably what people who live near beaches do.
Yeah.
I've lived near many beaches in my time, and I've never once done that, but I also don't like beaches.
You don't like beaches. Yeah, you're not a good representative.
It would never be something I would want to do. No. But Freddie is, he's being nice. He's reaching out to the new kid, and Mom is feeling great about that. She's like, "You see, things are working out already." And then she tries to Daniel tries to turn on the sink, and water starts spraying up at the ceiling, and they're like, "Ugh. Sink is broken. Daniel, go find the maintenance man and ask him to fix it."
Yeah.
So Daniel goes wandering through the apartment complex and is trying to figure out where this maintenance guy lives. We find out later that this maintenance man has a different place to live, but he also sort of appears to live in the office at the apartment complex. It's not really clear what the housing situation is.
I think the implication is that, again, Miyagi's home that Daniel and he spend time training in is like geographically further away. It wouldn't make sense for him to
That's like his weekend house or something.
It's his house. It's just like, yeah, he does from time, because like maintenance requests happen in the middle of the night sometimes. Yeah. So he probably spends more time at the apartment complex. And we know that he can't drive, so
well, he shouldn't.
He shouldn't. He's not licensed to drive.
Yeah. But Daniel goes into this very dark, smoky room and sees an old Japanese man sitting there with some chopsticks, just sort of like pinching at the air in front of him. And Daniel is like, "Hey, can you come fix our faucet?" And the old man is like, "I will, after." Yeah. And Daniel's like, "After what?" And he's like, After.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Daniel leaves, and we cut to the beach scene.
Also, just a quick note about that initial scene. This is the first time Daniel's meeting Miyagi. He opens the front door, does a courtesy knock on the screen door. Miyagi doesn't turn around to look at him. So then Daniel decides, "Oh, okay, let me just walk right in." In which case, Miyagi does turn around to give him the evil eye of like, "What the hell are you doing here?" You just walked
into my home? ?
And we have this kind of tense moment where they stare each other down, and Daniel realizes like, okay. I'm just, all right, after. You got it, bud. I'm gonna go now.
Okay, cool.
All right.
Our sink is never getting fixed. But the vibe that Daniel is familiar with is how to have a good time with his bros. So he's at the beach with Freddie Fernandez and all of his friends. And they're playing beach soccer, which seems to mostly consist of kicking sand directly into the faces of all the other people who are just trying to sit on the beach and have a nice time.
Yep.
But as he's doing this, he locks eyes with a beautiful blonde girl whom he stares at very intensely for like 2 straight minutes at point blank range. Like he's standing just next to her towel, staring at her.
Real close. It's, their eyes did not lock from afar. Their eyes locked right on top of each other.
But his new buddies come up and say like, "Ugh, forget about it, buddy. She's from the hills."
They're from the hills, man.
So she is rich.
Yep.
I bet her sink works just fine.
Probably. Also, it's pretty evident that Freddie Fernandez and company are all sort of in the like Reseda crowd. They also live in these sort of rundown apartments. They are mysteriously ethnic of some ilk.
Yeah.
Like Daniel kind of fits in with them right away. They're having a great time.
Yeah, whereas like the rich girls are sitting on their towels a little ways away, and they've got a fancy stereo, and they're just kind of watching the boys from a distance, but not directly interacting with them.
Right.
Not yet, at least. But later at the bonfire, Freddie is like, "You know what? she seems to be feeling it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, man, maybe go and talk to her. Because the thing about Allie, because this is going to be her name, although we won't find it out for like 15 more minutes of runtime.
Allie with an I.
Allie with an I, is that she, much like Mary Bailey, when she calls her shot, she calls her shot.
Yeah.
And everyone is aware that she has done this. So immediately everybody else is like, oh, Allie's into that guy.
Yep.
And so she like...
Well, hey, staring is a two-way street, right?
It's true.
Like,
she didn't get up and walk away when Daniel, like, stopped 4 feet from her face and stared intensely.
Yeah.
So.
They were looking longingly at one another, you might say.
Yeah. So she does this, like, cute thing where she's like, oh, I don't know how to juggle a soccer ball. Can you show me how to do it? Can you come over here with me and show me how you do it? Yeah, Allie knows what she's doing. She knows what she's about. And
a few hair flips.
We must respect that.
Yeah.
But just as this cute exchange is happening, a pack of teen bikers pulls up. God, there's nothing funnier to me than a teen biker. In retrospect, like, can you imagine seeing a bunch of 16-year-olds on motorbikes being like, hey, baby, just like, what are you doing? Does your mom know you're here? But the answer is, of course, no, because these boys are led by an equally blonde boy named Johnny.
The blondest of them all.
Yes, the blondest boy, despite the fact that several other boys in this biker gang have clearly tried to dye their hair as, like, bright blonde as they possibly could.
Well, gang is the right word. They're all wearing these like matching red leather jackets. They all have similar looking like dirt bikes that they're cruising around on. They at least Johnny's wearing a head. I think he wears a headband. I don't think the others do, but
no, most of them don't.
Also, by the way, like before they like roll up on the beach, we are introduced to Johnny when one of his friends asks him if he wants to drink. And he's like, no way, man. School starts tomorrow. I'm going to be a senior this year. I'm trying to turn over a new leaf. It's all uphill for me now. I'm going to really just, like, stay on the straight and narrow, dude.
Yeah. And
5 seconds later.
That resolve lasts until it takes for, like, the light waves of Daniel and Allie talking to each other to reach his eyeballs.
Yep.
And then he's immediately like, time to do a murder.
Yeah, basically.
Because we find out from his friends, who, again, are mostly there just to provide expositions, being like, whoa, isn't that Allie, your ex-girlfriend, talking to another boy? Are you just going to let her do that, Johnny? And it turns out he is not.
And then other bro is like, no, I heard it was over between you two. And then third bro is like, well, it's not over with Johnny. It's just like, oh, thanks for all providing his internal monologue for us.
No. What one of the friends is like, I thought you two broke up.
Oh,
and
yeah.
what the other bro said is, she did, he didn't.
Ooh.
And which will signal to you that we are about to enter a scene in which perhaps the most textbook example of what we might call toxic masculinity will be on display.
He really checks all the boxes.
It's like he's reading off a checklist over the course of this scene. So Johnny gets off his bike, stomps down the beach, and immediately like grabs Allie physically, and tries to just right out the gate start a fight with her. And when she tries to like pull away, he steals and then breaks her radio, which, remember, this is the 1980s in California on a beach. Like, breaking someone's radio is, I think, an act of war.
Yeah. Can't harsh the vibe, man.
Yeah, that's an extremely grave offense.
Can't bash the crunchy tunes, dude.
Yeah, and so when Daniel steps in to try to be like, whoa, man, what are you doing? Johnny then, like, shoves Allie over physically and then gets into a physical fight with Daniel in which he... Okay, so this movie is about karate, but this is the craziest... Like, no one fights like this. He's doing, like, spin kicks while Daniel is, like, standing there politely waiting for him to kick him repeatedly. Daniel, you at this point have not trained in karate yet. why aren't you fighting dirtier than this? Like, he's just letting himself get kicked over and over again in the stomach, which of course prompts Allie to say something to Johnny along the lines of like, oh, I bet you feel like a real big man now, to which Johnny is like, shut up, this is all your fault. Because, you know, all he wanted to do was talk. Yeah. And she was the one who's being so unreasonable and embarrassing him in front of these strangers, so he had to fight this guy.
Yeah, obviously.
And we kind of get a sense that this is maybe how all of their interactions have gone, at least for a while. Him just sort of acting out his anger against her and people that she likes and cares about and her physical possessions. But Daniel, God bless him, gets one good punch in. Well, he gets a punch in.
He gets a sucker punch in. He fully sucker punch. So, like, yeah, like, we have Johnny and the boys show up. To which Johnny approaches Allie, says, I want to talk. She says, well, I don't. Then he touches her stuff, turns off the radio. She turns it back on. So, like, initially, right, he's, like, denying her consent.
Right.
That's the first thing. And then Daniel simply intervenes by, when the radio gets thrown down, picks it up, hands it back to Allie, or tries to. Johnny knocks it out of his hands, pushes his former girlfriend away. And then, like, at what point does the fight between John, like, what's the inciting incident? It doesn't matter.
It doesn't really matter. It's one boy tried to diffuse a little bit and then was like, oh, you're gonna be aggressive? All right, we're both being aggressive now. It's just that Daniel is not good at fighting, and like, Johnny is.
So the first couple of moves, you know, Johnny is, like, tripping him, letting Daniel sort of fall over his own feet and laughing and jeering. Mm-hmm. This is where it escalates, though, because Allie makes it clear. She, like, gets upset and says, you're always doing this. You always are just fighting. And his retort is, bullshit. Like, you know, it's like...
It's the most 80s intonation.
Yeah. And so, like, after a punch and a kick and Daniel's sort of down on the sand, I think Johnny walks over to him and is like, had enough? From the ground, Daniel pops up and just sucker punches Johnny right in the mouth, which I think is hilarious. But it's even funnier because at that moment, Daniel says, all right, that's it. I got you. Like, we're even. You hit me, I hit you. Basically, right? He's like, we're done. We're even. To which Johnny says,
nope.
No mercy,
enough.
man.
Yep. And it is also at this point where Allie, who, again, I love her spirit, and I do hate the decisions she occasionally makes, which is where she's like, oh, if you want to punch somebody, you should punch me instead. And it's like, girl, this is him metaphorically punching you. Like, he's doing this to tell you in no uncertain terms what he can and perhaps someday will do to you if you continue to make him unhappy.
First, it's verbal. Second, it's possessions, your radio. Third, it's displacing it onto another person. Maybe there's the step where he harms himself, but I doubt it. I mean, he might do self-destructive behavior, but no, he's probably coming for you next.
Yeah, and the only thing that seems to, like, get Johnny to stop short of actually doing Daniel, like, very serious physical harm is that a crowd has gathered to watch this, and he can kind of sense that the crowd has turned against him at a certain point where it's like, Daniel tried to, like, diffuse it by saying, like, okay, you hit me, I hit you, let's stop, and you didn't stop. And now you have a girl saying, like, oh, if you're such a big tough guy, why don't you come and hit me instead? And, like, none of this is a good look for him. And at that point, he's like, fine. My friends and I will just leave on our really cool, loud bikes.
We'll just do some donuts on the sand real quick.
Yeah. God.
While Daniel is face down in the dirt, bleeding, probably got some broken ribs.
Yeah.
He is gnarly.
And when Allie comes over to try to be like, oh, are you okay? He's like, please don't talk to me.
Just leave me alone.
Just leave me alone.
Just leave me alone.
The 80s, at least as depicted in movies, like, teen culture was so out of control. It was just a lot of people being like, yeah, you're allowed to, like, beat the shit out of people in public places. And, like, the bully culture was very intense. I don't know. I don't know if that was true to life or not, but I feel like every 80s movie features someone, like, really getting assaulted in a way that's pretty upsetting if you think about it, and then people being like, oh, this guy.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean, this guy? Call an ambulance. What's wrong with you people?
I know we're harping on it for a little while here, but this does foreshadow something really important about what Daniel holds up as, like, the thing that he has to do in this movie. There is a sort of honor and respect that he has to earn, and there is something to be said sort of like in the context of this film about like needing to be tough enough, like in a weird macho kind of way.
In a Ralph Macchio kind of way. Yeah, I mean, he says it multiple times throughout the movie. It's not that he's fighting even necessarily because he wants to like hurt Johnny. He doesn't care about hurting Johnny. He just wants to, like, prove himself to the extent that he can be left alone.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to just be an easy target. At least in a culture where you have a group of boys like this with this much social power roving around, hurting people physically, and, like, you are not in a position to take any, like, official channels to get that to stop. What you have to do is prove to them that it is not worth trying to get into a fight with you.
Right.
Because you can, like, give it at least as good as you can get it, you know?
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, Daniel has to become the sort of counterpoint to Johnny, but what that means is that their circles are also affected. Johnny's lackeys are just as happy to go and do violence to strangers because that's what Johnny does.
Well, all except for one of them, but we'll talk about him later.
But by proxy, like, if Daniel is tough enough to not be messed with, then that means his friends and loved ones are also protected. And that's what he wants, is to ultimately find the strength to not have to fight.
Yeah, exactly. The next morning, Daniel wears sunglasses to breakfast and tries to, like, leave the house without his mom seeing that he has a black eye. But she doesn't buy that for a second because she is the mother of a teenage son, a single mother of a teenage son.
Show me your eyes.
Yeah.
What do you want? You want something?
Let me see those beautiful brown eyes. She's very, like, pleasant about it through the whole conversation until he, like, really staunchly refuses to take his sunglasses off, in which she switches immediately to, like, are you on drugs?
Yeah.
What are you up to, Daniel? Show me. And so he, like, you know, shows her the black eye, and of course she's like, oh my God, what happened? And he's like, oh no, I fell off my bike. Fell off my bike, it's fine.
Dear listener, this is not just a black eye. This is like
gnarly.
Rocky after round 8. Okay,
it's bad.
Like he can't see out of this thing. It's awful. It's half of his. I mean, he looks Zuko'd. You know, like he is straight up just like
Zuko'd.
Yeah, he's bad.
And so she is understandably upset, but Daniel is saved by the bell, the school bell, because he has to go to class.
Yeah.
So he goes to school, where of course he just sees Johnny in the parking lot first thing. And this is such a strange moment that we pause the movie for several minutes. As Daniel is walking into the school, it pans over to this plaque on the wall. And I had to, like, write down the exact wording because I was like, this is so bonkers. The plaque on the wall reads, "This building dedicated to truth, liberty, and toleration by the native sons of the Golden West," which is a buck wild thing to have on the school on a wall at any school. That's just sort of a strange sentiment. But if the native sons of the Golden West in question are like Johnny and his boys, then I will say this school is in fact not dedicated to truth, liberty, or especially toleration.
No.
Yeah, it's just a strange way to be like, you know how high school is terrible? We put up an irony plaque in ours to really hammer home how much it sucks to be a teenager.
And we see that, actually. We see the sort of hypocrisy in school a little bit later.
Well, and the first sort of domino to fall, at least for Daniel, is Freddie, who doesn't want to be seen with, as he jokes, the karate kid, since he got his ass kicked on the beach and embarrassed Freddie in front of all of his cool friends. But
Fairweather Freddie.
You know who does, in fact, still want to be seen with Daniel, and in fact kind of insists upon it?
Someone hotter than Freddie?
Much hotter. It is Allie.
Yeah.
She, like, comes up to him at, I guess, soccer tryouts, where just everyone is out on the soccer field. She comes up and she's like, oh, thank you for, like, standing up to me on the beach. I'm sorry that Johnny hit you. He's so mean. Maybe I should have just given him the radio and, like, avoided all this conflict.
Why? It wasn't his.
Yeah. Daniel just says it wasn't his. And it's my favorite moment in the whole movie. Like, this is my, like, moment where it's just, you see Allie realize what Daniel has just said to her and say, oh, you're right. It wasn't.
Which is also horrifying for me because, as we'll see later, it's like, where did she become sort of indoctrinated to believe that men can just take whatever they want and that that's okay and women are expected to just give it to them even if they're violent psychopaths? Like, oh, that's right, her freaking parents and everyone in her life at the
whole
country
world.
club, the Encino Country Club.
Yeah. This is very clearly the first time anyone in Allie's life is like, no, you shouldn't just give men whatever they want just because they want it. And especially not under threat of physical violence. Like, this is the first time that anyone has ever told her that it is okay for her to stand up for herself. And it clearly, like, changes her whole perspective moving forward. Like, that one conversation of Daniel just being like, it wasn't his. It was yours, and you shouldn't have to give someone something that's yours.
What I love about this scene is obviously all of that, but then it's visually and physically reinforced that Allie's character is one that is capable of transformation and that she's receptive, because then she's like, hey, and look what I can do. And she starts juggling the soccer ball and like showing him that that she practiced the little moves that Daniel taught her on the beach. And it's like, oh, that's cute. She's like showing and telling that she is willing to listen to sources outside of her sort of normal biased echo chamber to grow in unexpected ways, whereas everyone else in her community is just locked right in.
Yeah, and in fact, that maybe is, like, the thing that she wants more than anything, which is why she, like, gets attached to Daniel so quickly, because he does come from somewhere very different, and he is... You know, it never seems to bother her that he doesn't come from money. She just wants to see more of the world than the country club and the one guy that her parents probably picked out for her when she was 4 and decided she needed to marry when she grew up or whatever.
So gross.
She's just like, I want to learn things. I want to change and evolve. No one else around here wants to, but you are different. Please show me the rest of the world.
That's why she and Daniel are such a good foil to one another, because that's Daniel's position exactly once he starts to get to know Miyagi a little bit better.
Yeah, but he has some more trouble to run into before that can happen, unfortunately, because Johnny and his blonde posse are all here at the soccer tryouts too, and Daniel, at least at this point in the story, will fight anyone who trips him. So, of course, one of Johnny's boys trips him, and Johnny just Daniel gets to his feet and just immediately starts wailing on the other kid, which is like, my boy, you probably shouldn't be on the soccer team then, because that's the kind of stuff that happens in soccer a lot.
I mean, it was a mean slide tackle for sure, clearly intentional, but then without missing a beat, Daniel just pops up, tackles this guy, gets on top of him, slugs him right in the face.
Yeah.
But then here's that, like, truth, integrity, toleration BS, because then the soccer coach comes over and is like, get out of here, LaRusso, we ain't got time for that shit on this team. Like, clearly pissed at Daniel, the new kid from out of town, and doesn't at all admonish someone who did an illegal and unsafe thing that, like, incited him to violence.
Well, and that's another way that groups like Johnny's posse get to function, is they know how to do bad things without making it look like they were the aggressor.
Exactly.
Like, there's a reason that on the beach, Johnny is like, well, I wouldn't be doing this if you had just talked to me, because he knows at least a couple of people in the audience will be like, just go and talk to him. It's fine. This kid slides on the ground knowing that's a thing that sometimes happens in soccer, knowing that it will instigate Daniel because they just fought the night before already, so he's already mad.
Come on, coach, it was an accident.
Exactly.
You know me, I'm a good guy.
Yeah, that's, once again, this is abuse 101 functioning in this group of teenage boys. Yeah. How did they learn it?
How?
Where did they learn it from?
Where?
We'll find out later. So Daniel, you know, he has some aggression and is maybe in need of an outlet, but the best outlet he has at the moment are his This is very cute. Karate books, which he has at home. And so when the maintenance man, who I don't think we've learned his name yet, but of course, this is the Karate Kid. You know, it's Mr. Miyagi.
It's Mr. Miyagi.
When Mr. Miyagi comes in to fix the sink, he sees Daniel doing these moves from his book where he's like, whoa, whoa.
He's throwing some kicks.
Yeah, he's like, oh, okay, good job.
Yeah.
Good for you.
But importantly in this scene, though, we learn another thing about Miyagi. He asks Daniel what happened to his eye. And Daniel goes, oh, well, nothing. I just fell off my bike. And Miyagi says something smart there.
Oh, he's like, you're lucky you didn't hurt your hands, too.
Oh, yeah,
when you fall off of a bike, it would be weird to just hit your eye and no other part of your body.
And then they sort of stare each other down a little bit, reminiscent of their first scene, like,
Yeah, like, so Miyagi knows that Daniel got this in a fight. Daniel knows Miyagi knows he got it in a fight, but they're both kind of like, all right, none of my business.
Yeah.
We're not going to talk about it. Back at school, Allie, up to her old tricks. She's been asking around about Daniel. So she has like kind of learned where he's from and all of this kind of stuff because she's curious about him, because she likes him, because she is trying to make him understand that she would like to date him, and he is not being as receptive to that as she wants. But she's like, don't even worry about Johnny. He's my ex-boyfriend. We've been broken up for 5 whole weeks, which is very high school. Be like, that's an eternity. So, I mean, she's totally a free agent. She's definitely interested in him, and he pays for her school lunch, which is very cute. It's the ultimate act of chivalry in high school. But Daniel kind of knows that if he wants to make it in this cutthroat new social environment, he is gonna need some formal training. So he rolls up to the... Is it just called Cobra Kai? Is the school called Cobra Kai?
It is the Cobra Kai dojo. We only see the sign out front that says karate.
That is very martial arts school, I feel like. Where you just see in a strip mall, like, karate.
Yes.
And then you're like, oh, I'm going to have to go in to learn more. This is the only sign they have outside. So he goes in, and the first thing we hear the sensei say is, fear does not exist in this dojo, does it? And all the boys, because it is all boys in the room, go, no, sir.
Yeah.
Or no, sensei, I guess.
No, sensei.
No, sensei. So this man is
Weakness does not exist in this dojo, does it?
No, sensei. So the man in charge around these parts...
Wait, he says one more. Pain does not exist in this dojo, which is even
Is he
scarier.
Giving him morphine? Like, what do you mean pain doesn't exist?
You know,
Jesus.
physical, mental, emotional pain. We don't tolerate that weak garbage here.
Yeah, well, and why would you when you are, what we learn about, is it Kreese?
Yeah, John
Kreese.
Sensei John Kreese.
He has pictures of himself up all over the sort of entryway to his dojo, and so we learn that he is, I believe, a Vietnam veteran?
Vietnam War veteran.
Green Beret.
Yep.
That's what we learn.
The only thing we see is this picture where he's in uniform holding a big gun, very muscly, and it has some dates of service, and it says his rank, Captain, Sergeant, something. But it also says Karate Champion, indicating that, at least in part, he was doing martial arts as part of his military service. Which, flash forward, they did flesh this out a little bit in Cobra Kai. Like, he was part of this, like, special unit that was taught hand-to-hand combat martial arts stuff to do, like, high-profile missions. And then, unfortunately, he was a prisoner of war, where perhaps some of his character building, not pain, not weakness, trauma, informed some of this attitude.
And that is, in fact, how he ended up with the slogan that Spencer quoted before of strike hard, strike first, no mercy, which is just kind of a fun and chill thing to say to a group of kids. And who would be his prize student, if not Johnny Lawrence?
Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Lawrence.
Warm them up.
Yeah, so as soon as Daniel walks in, he sees Johnny and he just pieces and just walks right back out.
Yeah.
Like, this is a non-starter.
How small is California, I think, is what this kid is thinking. He's like, of all the karate schools in all of Encino.
How is there one karate school in Reseda? That seems crazy.
Well, and clearly, I think, this is why I think his mom works somewhere else. Because, again, Daniel and Mrs. LaRusso live in Reseda, but this is a scene where he's like visiting his mom for lunch, and she's clearly like on break or about to go do something with her employees. And across from the restaurant is this karate dojo in presumably a nicer part of the community.
Yeah.
Because like, come on, Johnny, he wouldn't be seen dead in Reseda.
He wouldn't be slumming it in Reseda. Daniel goes conveniently directly across the street from the dojo to the Orient Express restaurant. Now that is too on the nose.
Yeah.
And so he's like eating lunch or dinner or something with his mom, and she's like, "Oh, I'm up for a promotion already. See, things are already going so good here, and I promise I can tell you're kind of like not in a great place. You're maybe still not super happy that we're here, but you know, you're not a quitter, and you're going to make some friends soon, and everything is going to be fine."
Yeah.
And this scene is very cute.
It's adorable.
It's funny for two reasons. First is they're having this very cute conversation in the foreground where his mom is like, "Oh, come on, tell me about the girls at school. There's got to be some girls at this school that you like. I feel like everywhere I look, everybody is blonde and beautiful." Yeah. And he's like, "Okay, there is this one girl. She's named Allie." And she's like, "Oh, is she as pretty as Judy?" And he says, "She buries Judy in a second."
She buries Judy?
She buries Judy? No. And in the background of this shot, because they're sitting in front of a window, you see all the guys leaving the Cobra Kai dojo, and it's just Johnny's posse, like, running back and forth, like, running up to the window and being like, Is that him? Oh shit, dude, that's him. He's over there with his mom. Look, he's over there. Get Johnny. Well, we gotta go over there. No, we can't go over there.
That's Daniel eating with his mom? With his mom?
And so you can see them like plotting in the background, and then they run away around the corner. And then his mom has to go back to work, and Daniel's just sitting there at the Chinese restaurant, just like by himself, still speaking out loud about Allie. He's like, "Wow, she's so smart, and like
she's smart.
She's really like brave.
She's brave.
God, she's pretty.
She's cute.
I mean,
she's cute.
Beautiful.
She's
really.
beautiful,
I mean, I think she's beautiful.
You know what? She's hot.
Yeah,
she's hot.
Actually, she's hot.
It takes a long time. And like, as funny as that is, the thing that's funniest to me is how this freaking psychopath is eating a full meal by himself that consists of what appears to be a steak, French fries, and a goblet of milk at the Orient Express.
Orient Express restaurant. Oh my God.
It's just a nice Delmonico with the... Bro.
Just a filet mignon and a glass of milk for Daniel Larusso.
You know they ain't got no money for filet.
Well,
but it's probably a nice ribeye. Oh, yeah. Well,
they
she's
were celebrating.
Up for a promotion. Yeah, and it bothers me she didn't get to eat. I've always been puzzled as to, like, what shift does she work? What meal was this?
Yeah, it's
what
very
day
confusing.
of the week was any of this?
Yeah, it's very strange. But Daniel stays at the Orient Express restaurant alone long enough for the sun to go down.
Right.
Because he is biking home alone in the dark. And this is where the Cobra Kai karate boys find him.
Yeah.
And they are about to give him his first karate lesson. Do you remember what the first karate lesson is?
Learn to fall, but also make sure it doesn't hurt. Bye.
Yep, it's how to take a fall.
How to take a fall.
So they push him and his bike fully down a hill. And so he has damaged his bike, he has damaged his body, and when his mom comes home from work, she sees him in, like, the back parking lot throwing his bike into a dumpster.
This scene is raw.
This scene is hard to watch.
This is probably the best acting that Ralph Macchio gives us in this whole film. Like, he's just like, again, by himself, beaten and bruised, and he's just like, "I hate this stupid bike, I hate this stupid town, I just want to go home." Just like trying to throw it in the garbage, and he can't even do it. Like,
he keeps like missing the dumpster. He's all bloody, and his mom is, she's panicking because she's like, "Oh my God, what happened? What happened to you?" And he doesn't want to tell her.
I'm okay. I just want to go home.
Yeah,
I'm fine.
And it culminates in him being like, "You just want me to pretend that I am happy here, and I am not.
Yeah.
And it is not fair that you got to move me across the country for something that you wanted to do, and you have never asked me what I wanted.
You didn't even ask me if I wanted."
Yeah, and right now what you want for me is to pretend that I'm happy for you when I in fact am not, and I'm miserable. And it's very sad.
Well, and to Mrs. LaRusso's credit, she immediately is just like, "You know what?
Yep.
You're right. I didn't ask you.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry."
Yeah, and she says, now that you have told me what's wrong, you and I are going to figure out the rules of how to exist in this new place together. Because that's part of Daniel's issue, is that he doesn't know how to operate in this new culture.
You know, I mean, he's having this, like, full-on panic, just, like, frustration moment.
Yeah, he's like trying to do what seems to him to be the right thing to do, and he keeps getting punished for it.
And of course, all of this is happening first at the dumpster, then Mom pulls in, and then they're having the bulk of this conversation right outside of the door that we saw in the earlier scene that leads into Miyagi's workspace / cot area or whatever. Yeah. I don't know if he lives there or not.
Yeah. So Mr. Miyagi has overheard this conversation and seen Daniel throw his bike into the dumpster. So when Daniel gets home from school the next day, Daniel's has switched strategies. For now, he's trying to avoid Johnny, which is causing some issues with Allie because she has reached a place where she's like, we need to present a united front. We are both having a problem with Johnny. I would like to go and try to address it. And Daniel is like, absolutely not. He's going to try to kill me again. I am not going anywhere near him.
And it really sucks, too, because, like, she's invited him to come to the arcade with her after school. Things look really cute and fun. And then as soon as he sees the biker boys, he's like, oh, no, actually, I forgot. I got to go do a thing. I got to
go.
And her answer immediately shows us, like, nah, man, like, I'm into you. She says, we've got to face this sooner or later. As, like, I want to date you. I want to have a relationship with you. And if you want that, then, like, you and I will need to figure out how to deal with Johnny.
Yeah.
And he's like, don't care, gotta go. Like,
not my problem.
Scooby-Doo legs, getting out of there. Like, because, again, he could have gotten killed the night before. Like, he's on a bicycle and 4 or 5 dirt bike motorcycle bros surround him and run him off of what just could have been a cliff. Like, they did not care about his safety at all. It's the 1980s, man.
Yeah, and of course he's not wearing any kind of helmet or anything as any of this is happening, so he really could have gotten very hurt. But when Daniel gets home, he sees his bike fixed up, all bright and shiny outside the door. It looks so nice. And he figures out that, hey, that maintenance man is the only person who could have done this. Yeah. So he goes down to say thank you, and he finds Mr. Miyagi pruning his bonsai trees.
Yeah.
This is the first time we get to learn anything at all about Mr. Miyagi. We learn that he is from Okinawa, and his father is the one who taught him how to trim the bonsai. So he has a whole lot of these trees in his little room. And he offers to let Daniel try to prune one of them. And Daniel's like, oh, no, man, I'm just going to mess it up. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I don't know how. I couldn't do this. I don't know how.
Yeah, and Mr. Miyagi's like, no, don't worry. You just close your eyes. You picture the perfect tree. Yep. Just like clear your mind, picture nothing but the perfect tree. And all you have to do is remember that picture and shape the tree to fit the picture, because if the picture comes from inside you, it will always be the right one.
I'm crying. Like, I love this scene so much. I love it. It's beautiful because Daniel takes a minute, he listens, he does what he says, he closes his eyes, and Miyagi's like, do you see the tree? He's like, yeah. He's like, okay. And he hands him the little pruners, and then just Daniel sits there quietly for a long time and starts snipping the leaves until Mom shows up. Like, presumably he's just there for a couple of hours or something.
Yeah. And when Mrs. LaRusso, or Miss LaRusso, I guess we don't know, shows up, Mr. Miyagi is like, oh, please, take one of my trees. And she's like, oh, that's extremely generous now. And he's like, oh, it'll hurt my feelings if you don't.
Yeah.
He does that a few times throughout the movie where people are like, oh, no, I can't.
You'll hurt the feelings of an old man.
Yeah, you'll hurt my feelings. Come on, take them. I mean, it's interesting knowing that class is such a big part of this movie. Like, both Daniel and his mom try to, like, turn down gifts. Like, no, don't, like, I can't accept things from people. I don't want to do that. And Mr. Miyagi, of course, every time we've seen him, he has been alone, and he has a lot of these trees in his little apartment thing. And you kind of get the sense that, no, it really would mean something to this person if you took his gift. This gesture, which from someone else might have felt like a sort of condescending, oh, here, you guys, you don't have any nice decorations in your apartment or whatever. It doesn't feel like that. We get the sense that for Mr. Miyagi, it genuinely means something to have someone in his life to give gifts to.
And it's also clearly important that he gives Daniel something. He gives him a tree and hands him the pruner things and says, like, so you can practice. Like, that's the thing that's important. We've already seen Mr. Miyagi clock Daniel as someone who is both in need of something and searching for something, right? He's trying to learn karate out of books. He is in need of, in the first part is, bike getting fixed or whatever. Right. And like, he's clearly in need of someone to talk to that's not his mom, or someone to confide in about things that he doesn't want to tell his mom, like getting into fights, which Miyagi knows is what's been happening.
It turns out to be very good at this juncture in the story that Daniel does have this sort of outside figure to talk to, because he's progressed into like actively avoiding Allie at school, and we know like Freddy's crew doesn't want to talk to him anymore. Depending on the amount of power that Johnny's crew has, he probably doesn't have any other friends. And we find that Daniel is actively avoiding events at school, such as the Halloween dance. And Mr. Miyagi is like, oh, why aren't you going to the dance? Come on, you're a young person. You should go have fun. It's not good to be alone all the time. And Daniel's like, I would only go as the invisible man, so no one could see me. But Miyagi is a maintenance man. So he's like, oh, you want a costume that makes it so nobody can see you? I have a great idea.
I got you.
And it's a really good costume, actually. It's so funny. Every time I see it, I'm like, God, that's a good Halloween costume.
It's a great costume. And before he goes, though, like, Miyagi's trying to convince him to make the decision to go. He says, it's not good to spend so much time by yourself. Later, we see what he means. Like, Miyagi has also engaged in this kind of hermit behavior that Daniel has been doing, presumably for the past couple of months or whatever, of just trying to avoid and hide away from problems in the world.
Yeah, and, seeing someone so young already engaging in that, he makes a point to be like, come on, man.
Yeah.
You gotta get back out there. So he makes him a shower costume.
Yeah, it's awesome.
He could just, like, pull the curtain all the way around, which is great because Allie loves a novelty costume. Which is just another way that you know that she's a good person. So she goes up to him and, like, they pull the shower curtain around both of them, and so they get to dance together, and it's very cute.
Super
cute.
And
they have this conversation about Johnny and karma, where Allie is basically saying, like, Johnny will get his punishment in due time. And Daniel is like, you know what due time would be? Right now.
Yeah.
Because he goes to the bathroom and sees, like, Johnny's crew is in there and Johnny is in one of the stalls. And so Daniel goes over to this, like, janitor sink that has a whole hose attached to it for some reason.
Very silly.
And, like, sticks the hose, God, I forgot the word immediately, sticks the hose over the stall wall, turns the water on, and then runs. And now his costume becomes kind of a hindrance because it's very obvious that it's him and you can see it really well. It's a big costume. And so Johnny is, in this scene and in this scene only, understandably upset. I would also be mad.
Yeah, I mean, that I don't know how much weed cost back then, but Johnny sure was rolling a doobie.
He sure was.
And, you can't smoke it when it gets wet. And so he and his boys that were ready to go on down to Funky Town.
He was dressed up like a skeleton, and he had done all the face makeup, and it takes a long time to get, like, a good skull face makeup thing going.
Hey, like, what did the other Cobra Kai guys dress up as?
Also skeletons.
Oh, weird. It's like they do everything together.
Yeah, they all match all the time.
It's like they're a freaking gang or a cult or both.
Or a group of teenage boys. But this one is particularly dangerous. So Johnny rounds up the boys and they're chasing Daniel through the parking lot where Daniel is bad in this scene. He is like running in between cars, causing them to swerve around him and run into each other. He's climbing up on top of people's cars and really freaking them out.
Causes a 4-car pileup.
Yeah. Daniel, come on. Like, you could have just had a nice night and hidden inside of your costume and avoided Johnny, and this would have been fine, but he couldn't resist. And as he's running through the gym, he's like, karma, there it is. There's the karma.
Yeah. And it's coming back around.
Yeah, just like, come on, Daniel. You know that's not what she meant. She wanted you to let this go. You have done the opposite. You have made it worse.
It's funny, though, because in some ways he doesn't No. And like at this
of course
point,
not. Yeah.
at this point in the movie, I think it really reinforces that like there are people in his life like Miyagi who are trying to teach him things. And then, like a freaking high schooler, he's like, oh, I get it. Oh, this really complex metaphysical, cosmological sort of philosophy. Yeah, I get it. It's coming back around.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You want me to spray this guy with a hose? Got it. Got it. Like, no, Daniel. No one said that. No.
Damn it.
Daniel.
No, dude.
So
it would have been better if you just smoked the doobie with him.
Yeah, that probably would have solved your problems a lot faster. But anyway, so he
also, what are these guys smoking that they're so aggro? Like, Daniel should have just let them smoke.
They didn't get the chance to smoke the weed yet.
But they're always aggro, and presumably they...
Well, weed wasn't very good yet in the 80s, okay?
No, well,
it wasn't good yet.
Maybe it was laced with some of that Cobra Kai.
Well, no, I think they're extremely entitled, wealthy white boys from California in the 1980s. I think that's what was poisoning them. But anyway,
fine.
They do manage to chase Daniel all the way back to like the fence behind his apartment complex. So he has led them back to his house, and they manage to get him cornered. And Johnny once again catches him and is like really laying into him. And this is where we see one boy in this group stand there and say, all right, Johnny, he's down. He's down. You don't need to keep going, Johnny. And the other boys in the group are all like, no, kill him, Johnny, kill him.
No mercy.
Yeah, no mercy, Johnny, because he's an enemy deserves no mercy, right?
Yeah.
An enemy, a thing that a teenager should have, an enemy.
This is war, man.
We see a spectrum even within this group where like Johnny is sort of in the middle. We have, I think his name is Bobby, is the nice one who's like, come on, man. Oh, well, nice here being a relative term, but being like, okay, you've made your point. Let's let it go. You're going to, like, kill him. That will be bad. And then you have this other unhinged guy who's just sort of like, no, you've got to destroy him. You got to destroy him, Johnny. And Johnny's like, oh, okay. All right, I'll kick him again. Which it turns out to be a bad plan because a mysterious figure shows up on the other side of the fence and, like, has the key and unlocks it. And then comes out and just, like, flips all these boys onto their asses and scoops Daniel up and takes him inside.
Wait, that's not the right one.
Spider-Man?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do. Because Daniel thinks Spider-Man saved him.
Oh, yeah. He's like, who is that? Spider-Man saved me? Which is wild because Mr. Miyagi is just wearing his regular clothes. Yeah. He doesn't look anything like Spider-Man.
Well, you see, that's how concussed Daniel was after the near fatal beating.
Yeah.
Like, it's really actually important to stress, like, you can watch this movie and the fight choreography looks a little goofy, but the scenes try to contextualize for you just how badly Daniel's getting hurt. He's woozy and cannot see straight. Again, he could have died. This is 4 or 5 guys beating the crap out of him, holding him up against the fence and just, like, kicking and punching him, like, brain damage style. This is brutal.
Yeah.
And it may look silly a little bit because these are actors who aren't probably martial artists or anything.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, it's not a game, man. It's not a game.
And so Mr. Miyagi takes Daniel inside and does the first of his vaguely mystical healings of Daniel's body where he's like dipping his headband into some kind of liquid that he's like, it smells bad, but it will heal you.
Mm-hmm. Smells bad, heals good.
Yeah. Unrealistic efficiency, but anyway.
At least this one, there's like an external elixir.
Yeah, there's just a thing he is doing and not
like
just like pulling magic out of the air.
Unspecified, orientalized medicine of some kind, a tincture, if you would.
Some kind of herbs.
Some herbs, yeah. And it's like, okay, all right, at least there's some herbs.
Yeah, at least there's something physical happening. But anyway, here, Daniel is like, whoa, you really beat the shit out of those guys. That was crazy. How'd you learn how to do that? And
also, he did. Mr. Miyagi fully just beat the crap out of 5 teenagers.
Yeah, they were all lying on the ground like, when they walked away. And here we get a history lesson from Mr. Miyagi. Because he's trained in the art of karate.
Yeah.
And he says that karate originated in China in the 16th century, coming from the word te, meaning hand. Later, the name evolved to karate, which means open hand. And Daniel's like, whoa, that's crazy. I thought it just came from Buddhist temples or something. And Miyagi is like, you watch too much TV.
Which is really funny.
Yeah, it is a funny admonishment. Spencer, you kind of know something about martial arts history, kind of. How accurate is that depiction of karate history as far as you know?
So what's funny to me, and it's kind of like a wink, little bit of a joke, that like they both kind of actually get it wrong a little bit. They both have important elements of karate mythology. In the martial arts studies circle, we're all familiar with this term, invented traditions, which is an anthropological term that just really means that like sometimes in modern societies, cultures, or nations tend to do this thing where they're like, hey, you know this thing we do right now? It's actually really old. It's like way older. We've been doing this for like so long as a way to sort of propagandize a nation state or to like make a culture seem more dominant and important than it actually is. There's lots of political reasons why folks might use this like invented tradition strategy. But like once they become entrenched and they become the sort of status of myth, most practitioners, whether it be in karate or any other martial art, think of it as like capital T truth. That like, yeah, oh, okay, well, like, you know, the monk Bodhidharma from India really did bring an unarmed fighting system to the Shaolin monks, and then it spread from China to Japan to Okinawa. It's like, no, I mean, maybe kind of, but like we don't have any verifiable historical documents because so many of them were burned through these like centuries in China. Like we don't really know about that one. And it's like, oh, well, it's the 16th century martial art that originated from 36 families in Okinawa and then spread to the mainland. And it's like, okay, all right. So sort of like kind of there were some like traditional indigenous practices that blended martiality and dance that were popular in Okinawa that spread. But like similar to what I study, Taekwondo, there are people, like if you look, Taekwondo's happening in the Olympics right now. And on the Olympic website, you can look and see a little blurb about all the sports and where they originated. And even right now, in the year of our sport, 2024, it says something on the Olympic website about like how Taekwondo originated in the Three Kingdoms period in ancient pre-Korea, and it's an offshoot of the indigenous Takian martial art. And it's like, no, it's not. It's just not. Like Takian, if it existed back then, was like a folk game, and then it saw a revitalization actually after Taekwondo became popular, and people tried to sort of reverse engineer a connection. And so anyway, back to your question, like what we know is that karate is largely a modern martial art, that it might have historical roots in the 18th century, but mostly 19th and 20th century. What Miyagi says, though, is correct, that karate, which means empty hand, at another point meant something like Chinese hand, and it was a way for Okinawans to suggest, like, no, we, like, this is something from mainland China that we have incorporated into our system, and so it's a form of Chinese boxing that we're doing. But, as you can imagine, Japanese imperialists really didn't like that name. This happened to Taekwondo as well. Some people still practice a style known as Tang Sudo, which Tang is like the word for Chinese after like the Tang dynasty. Anyway, this is all to say that like all of these names and traditions are highly politicized. We do know that karate was originally an offshoot of indigenous martial arts from Okinawa, formerly the Ryukyu Islands. But they weren't really formalized as what we might call karate today until, like I say, late 19th, early 20th century, when you had, you know, these characters that were trying to develop formal curricula in both judo and karate and kendo and other Japanese martial arts, and really export them and claim them as like a cultural heritage. So
part of the mythology around martial arts, at least in how these things are sort of marketed in the West is all of them are ancient, so ancient. You can't possibly imagine how ancient they all are.
Strike one. If someone tells you you're studying an ancient martial art, immediately be skeptical. Most of them are products of the 19th and 20th century, maybe 18th, but very late 18th century.
The other thing is like that they all have these like very clear boundaries, and it's like, oh, you can learn this one art that and it's this thing that is continued from antiquity till today, as if martial arts, like everything else in the world, are not constantly evolving over time. And it's like any other art in the whole world. Like everything has ties back to ancient art. But like
sort of tenuous ties, yeah.
Sure, like in a roundabout way, like yes, modern painters have something in common with cave painters, I guess. Yeah. But like you wouldn't say that a modern painting is like, yes, this is the product of, you know, a practice going back all the way to antiquity, and we've perfectly preserved it in amber, and we all do the same thing every time. And if you go anywhere in the world and you say the word karate to them, everyone will have the exact same picture of what that thing is.
Yeah, please be skeptical of that as well, because like I just said, there were different names as it evolved, and the original names were nothing karate. It wasn't named after this like idea, empty hand. Most of the original styles were like named after families and the regions they practiced. Similar to Taekwondo, the original Kwans were named after the people who taught them and the regions. And like it wasn't until years and years later when governing organizations or political bodies or sports agencies or people trying to get something in the Olympics consolidated all of these things to create what we now know as karate or Taekwondo. Give me a break.
Well, and it also suggests something. Like, the reason I said marketing earlier is because, like, that became, at least in the West, like, what you wanted to do with martial arts, right? Yeah. Like, it's one of the reasons that this movie has had the impact that it has, is because, like, it got people interested in going to a karate school. Mm-hmm. You have an easier time selling someone on something that's like, this is a distinct system. It will teach people these specific sets of things, and they will be able to function in the world in these exact ways, when it's like, none of these things were invented to do that. A system of like self-defense or something like that is meant to change and evolve over time, because your goal is to not get hurt, or, you know, whatever the original intention was. And so it's like, why would I be like, well, we can't incorporate these kinds of movements, that's not authentic or whatever. Like,
well, and we can get into the weeds really quickly with this. But like what you just said is like self-defense evolves over time. The simple answer for that is because offense evolves over time. We're not like, you can practice karate and Taekwondo as self-defense, but if you do, it's kind of silly because it doesn't defend against a gun. We live in the 21st century. Like, you know, some of the stuff barely defends against like sticks and stuff. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, and so like, and not all people practice martial arts for self-defense. They practice for sport or for spiritual reasons or for cultural reasons. Like I said, probably the original indigenous martial arts in Okinawa were related more to like a dance, cultural, ritual tradition. And they had martial elements, and that's cool. Done. Like, you know, anyway, so to save me from butchering some of this, because this isn't my area of expertise, really. It's close, but it's because Taekwondo comes so much from Japanese martial arts like Shotokan style karate. What we're going to do is link a lot of great sources in the show notes. I've got at least 2 martial arts studies articles that I think will help people better understand the sort of like sociological history of karate, and also more like modern influences. Like one that I pulled is about the influence of French fighting styles on karate because of the cross-cultural communication of the French military in Japan. And like, people don't think about that. Like, where'd they get their kicks? Well, from savate, the French foot fighting technique. Like, anyway, I could go down a real rabbit hole. But, and then there's also just a really brilliant video essay. Shout out to Peter Katz. I love this guy. He's a karate practitioner of some style. Forgive me. I'm sorry, Peter. But yeah, he asked the question, does my forward stance look a little bit fascist? And the answer is yes.
Yeah. Anytime something has military ties, it's always possible.
Well, and like that is something to bring it back to Karate Kid. Even in the small context of this film, we only see 2 styles, right? Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai. And it's like, okay, so you're representing what a Vietnam War veteran learned in the military compared to the art that Miyagi's father taught him.
Yeah.
Okay, these clearly have different meanings and different purposes and different like training methods. Like, what's the deal with that? But anyway, we'll get there.
Either way, even if the story that he gives Daniel is maybe a little bit more mythology than fact, Miyagi himself is in fact an expert in karate, at least the kind of karate that he specifically practices. And he did learn it from his father. He says something along the lines of like, all Miyagis know. We're all experts.
We know two things. Fishing and karate.
Fishing and karate. And so Daniel's like, oh, please, you got to teach me so that I can get revenge on these guys who've been bullying me. And Miyagi replies, fighting is always the last answer to a problem. You should really try to exhaust all your other options first. And he points out that those other boys who are like, yes, they're so good at karate, they're using it all the time, actually have the wrong attitude because in his opinion, it should only ever be used for defense, which means that they have been taught by a bad teacher.
Yeah. No such thing as a bad student. Only bad teacher.
Yeah. And Miyagi says something. Well, Daniel says like, oh, what am I just supposed to go like roll up to the teacher and tell him to stop? And Miyagi's like, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
You should do that first.
Great idea.
Which Daniel is like, well, I'm not gonna do that by myself. Will you come with me when I go and talk to this guy? And Miyagi's like, no.
Couldn't possibly. Miyagi can't get involved.
Yeah,
that's what he says.
No.
Okay, it's not. I can't get involved.
Yeah, this is
it's
not.
Like, bro, you're already involved. You just beat the crap out of 5 teenagers.
Well, yeah, and those teenagers are gonna go back to their teacher and tell them what happened and who did it.
Yeah.
And you don't know what kind of man he is. He might try to come and find you. Eventually, Miyagi comes around and is like, all right, fine, I'll go.
It doesn't take him long, to his credit.
It takes about 4 seconds.
5
just like, you know what, actually, that's fine. And Daniel's like, great. Hey, what kind of belt do you have? And Miyagi's like, it's canvas. I got it at JCPenney for $3.98. Do you like it? Because karate is not kept in a belt.
No.
It's in your head and in your heart, but not on the outside.
Yeah.
You can have whatever kind of belt you want. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. This is yet another way that we see so many sort of material external markers of the Cobra Kai style karate. They all have uniforms and stuff like that, belts and like, specific techniques and all this stuff. And Miyagi, like, no, he points to his head, points to his heart, and then like you made this joke, and he's like, but karate is not here. Points to his dick. And it's like, and in some ways, like,
hey boys, karate is not kept in the dick.
No, well, I like that scene is pantomimed that way. He doesn't say mind, heart, belt. He points, and I like that we can leave that up to interpretation because in some ways it's like, yeah, karate isn't about machismo. It's not about being stronger than someone. It's not about like vengeance, what Daniel says he wants, or violence at all. He doesn't tell him what it's about, but he just says it's like it's not kept in the belt,
Yeah, and I do appreciate Miyagi's sort of subtle approach here because when they walk into the dojo together, Sensei John is threatening his students and making them chant the word kill over and over and over again. Just, again, totally normal thing to do with a group of, 8 to 17-year-olds. Just cool and normal. Be like, kill, boys, kill.
Isn't this also the scene where we see them spar?
Yes. One of the students, knocks the other boy down and kind of stands back as if to be like, okay, I won. And he's like, what are you doing? Finish him. So when Daniel and Mr. Miyagi walk in, Johnny sees them and he sort of motions to his coach and he's like, Miyagi's the one who jumped me.
Miyagi busted them up.
Yeah. I mean, it's not, again, like, these are children and 2 of the people here involved are adults. And they should maybe be making different choices. But if those kids are bound and determined to kill somebody, I don't know, man. Got to do what you got to do. Anyway, so John Kreese comes over. He's like, are you the one who jumped my student? And Miyagi's like, it was self-defense. they were going to kill Daniel.
Yeah.
I would like for you to ask them to leave him alone.
Well, that kind of goes down that way. He goes, are you the ones that attacked my students? He goes, no, I think you have it wrong. Are you calling my students a liar? He's like,
God.
no, I didn't say that. Like we see
it's immediately a fight. Everything Mr. Miyagi says is a challenge, and John has to get all defensive about it.
Who?
John Kreese.
Sensei Kreese?
Sensei Kreese.
Show him respect.
I
Obviously,
will not.
With his cut off freaking gi sleeve cut off.
He cut the sleeves off of his karate uniform.
It's really funny. But like to the point we were just saying earlier about Miyagi saying like karate's in your head and your heart, not in your belt. Did you notice in that scene how he's walking around like holding his belt? Like he's just like walking around with his like hands around his belt knot, like, and again, dick forward in the way that only like a state police officer can do. I'm serious.
Yeah, he's carrying himself like he's wearing a gun belt. And of course, Sensei Big Dick says that, oh no, I think Daniel and Johnny should fight right here and now.
Yeah.
Which Miyagi's like, no.
Yeah. No
Your guy has been trained in karate and mine has not, so no, that wouldn't be fair. But I'll tell you what, I'll bring Daniel to the upcoming karate tournament and we'll settle this there. But in the meantime, up until the tournament, these guys have got to leave Daniel alone because, like, he can't go to school at this point.
Yeah. Also, aesthetically, Kreese is, like, trying to get up in Miyagi's face, but he's, like, like 2 heads taller than him. But I love the visual of this scene because Miyagi's just looking at him solid as a rock. Like, Miyagi has the biggest, doggest energy in this scene. He's just like, no, that's not how it happened.
Not
no,
phased,
we're not doing
afraid.
that.
Yeah.
Also, one more request. Don't have your guys jump my guy before the tournament. To which Kreese is like, you got some nerve, but I like that.
He does agree. He's like, okay, fine. But if you guys don't show up to the tournament, it's open season on you both. Again, normal thing to say. Can you? Okay,
Super
so
80s.
you are a martial arts teacher.
Yes.
Can you imagine if another adult man and a child came to you and were like, hey, one of the people you teach has been having some drama with this kid that I know. I would love for that to not be happening anymore. Can you imagine?
Can I tell you?
Looking at the other adult in the equation and being like, okay, but I'll fight you, other adult person with like a human job and taxes.
I would be horrified first, embarrassed second, and then if I were to fight anyone, I would be tempted to fight my own student. Like,
I'd be like, all right, you want to fight somebody? Come fight me.
I can't imagine. Like, no. Like, talk about a bad teacher. This is a horrible person.
Just the idea. Anytime an adult cares this much about interpersonal drama between teenagers, I'm just like, what has gone wrong here? You shouldn't care this much about dumb shit in your own life. You certainly shouldn't just get attached to some teenager you kind of know and be like, I will kill someone for you, child. Yeah. I'll do it right now. Like, that's not even what Johnny has asked of him.
Like to Jesus. That point, like, I do think Johnny was one of his first students. He's known him for a very long time. I am very attached to my students. I would defend them in almost any situation. And I would get physical if a situation demanded it. I see someone hitting my student, they can't defend themselves. Yeah. I will intervene. But to swear vengeance, avenged sevenfold on their ass, like just put the mark of Cain on Miyagi and
it's like Shakespearean, the level of like, if you do dishonor to my squire, you and I shall meet on open field of combat. Like, what are you do you have a mortgage? What's going on with you?
Surrender your pound of flesh, I shall take it all.
Yeah, just truly insane reaction. But that is the setup. We're a pretty good length of time into this movie, and we have just now gotten to the part of it that you have heard of before.
Yeah.
So if you have never seen it, this is where they go to Mr. Miyagi's house, his real house, where he has just a lot of vintage cars out front. But he tells Daniel, like, okay, don't worry. I know it seems bad and I've gotten you into a bad situation, but all you have to do is put on a respectable show at this tournament and everybody's going to leave you alone. Yeah. And in order to do that, Daniel is going to need to commit to his training. No questions asked.
Yeah.
Because that training involves... Well, you know what his training involves. He's going to wash the cars. And what's he going to do after he washes the cars?
He's going to paint the fence.
Right. Well, no, he's got to do
sand
something.
the floor.
Well, he's got to do something else to the cars first, though. What is it?
Well, you wax them.
Right, correct.
And then you take the wax off.
Right, yes.
Put the wax on, and then you take the wax off.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
Left circle, right circle,
yes.
left circle.
Well, now, and then you breathe in through your nose,
breathe
out
in,
through your mouth.
Breathe out.
All
left
right.
circle, right circle.
Congratulations, everyone. You're all karate masters.
You did karate.
When Daniel goes to show his good car karate work off to Mr. Miyagi, he finds him sitting in front of a shrine in his house, and he is asleep.
Yeah.
So Daniel is
He's meditating. I was just resting my eyes.
Just resting my eyes in front of my shrine. Daniel's like, okay, I'll let him sleep. And now that he doesn't have to worry about actually getting murdered at school, he's like, all right, time to ask Allie out for real this time, which means this Jersey boy is heading for the hills.
Oh, boy.
With his mommy driving, of course, because he is only 15 and he doesn't have a driver's license yet. This scene is also good because we didn't talk about it before, but this car is a real piece of shit.
Yeah.
It doesn't start. They have to do the running start thing every time they start this car.
Okay, kiddo, push.
You gotta push. So his mom drives him to Allie's house, which of course is just this giant McMansion on a hill.
I believe it's the house they used to film Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
It might be. It's a very nice house. And Allie opens the door, and right as that happens, her parents come home and they're wearing matching tennis outfits. And of course they've got they're rich people in the 80s, so they were required by law to wear a sweatshirt tied around their shoulders. You know what and so they're out there greeting Daniel, and they're like, well, where do you live, young man? And he's like, Reseda, and they're like, And this is where we sort of alluded to it before, but we start to get the sense that maybe Allie was not raised in the healthiest environment. Because at one point, Daniel, puts his foot up on a part of the porch and, a brick sort of falls off. It's, kind of embarrassing for Daniel for a moment because he's, fumbling. He's like, oh, God, sorry, I broke your thing. Allie's dad turns to the mom and is like, I thought I told you to have that fixed. And she's like, I was going to. I haven't gotten to it yet.
Again, a beautiful sort of visual metaphor because, clearly Daniel is embarrassed, feeling a little bit, small in the obvious wealth of these people. He's fidgeting. He's nervous to meet Allie's parents. But then, all they're focused on, this father is, nearly incensed by the idea that one brick could be out of place in this mansion. And it's
And again, it's whose fault is it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's mom's fault.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And not, I thought I told you to fix it. I thought I told you to have that fixed.
Yeah, why didn't you think this was your one job, woman, and you didn't do it?
Yeah.
And they are willing to have that conversation in front of a stranger.
Yeah.
So comfortable are they in that dynamic that it doesn't occur to them to have that conversation behind closed doors.
What a ridiculous reaction, too.
I know.
To be so materially obsessed. You're not at all interested in this dynamic of your daughter is dating someone new. You lose focus on this poor kid from Reseda, and then you just are immediately focused on this material part of your house, your wealth. Ugh,
yeah.
God, I hate these parents so much.
And I think a big part of why he has that reaction is because Daniel, a person that they have immediately clocked as inferior to them, has seen some part of the facade slip out of place for a second.
Yeah. That's why I like the visual so much.
Yeah. Which is hysterical given that his mom is down there in the worst car ever made. And so
Hi!
Hi, I'm Daniel's mom. Oh, are you Allie? Oh, she is pretty.
Yeah.
I love Mrs. Larry.
She's great.
So they're going to golf in the
Golf and stuff. Hey, you know how they get there, though?
In a car.
Yeah, Ms. LaRusso says, Allie, you know how to drive a stick? Okay, great. When I say punch it, you punch it.
Yeah,
and
Allie is in the driver's seat of this shitty car. All of this, her parents are still standing up there watching. Daniel and Mrs. LaRusso both get out of the car. Mrs. LaRusso again is like, oh, it always does this. Don't worry. It's under control. Your daughter's perfectly safe.
The most unflappable woman.
Shoving this car down a hill while their teenage daughter is in the driver's seat. It's very good.
It's so funny.
And what follows is the most 1980s scene in the whole movie because golf and stuff, which by the by looks like a fantastic time.
Golf and stuff rips.
It's just a giant, basically like arcade / sort of amusement park a little bit. There are giant water slides. There's a golf course. There's a big old arcade.
We had
There's
one
like
of these
trampolines and stuff. It looks so fun.
outside of my town. If you drove 45 minutes to go to Greensboro, North Carolina, you could go to Celebration Station.
Yeah, I think
they had bumper boats.
Yeah, all the bumper cars, and there's probably go-karts around there somewhere. It's very 80s. And what else is very 80s is that all of Allie's shitty rich friends pull up as Daniel's mom is like coming to pick them up. They pull up in this, convertible, and they're like, "Oh, Allie, you should come to a party with us." And she's like, "Oh, I'm with Daniel right now. We're kind of hanging out." And they're like, "Well, Daniel can come if his mommy says it's okay."
Hi, Mrs. LaRusso.
Hi, Mrs. LaRusso. So
I don't have a mom that cares about me.
yeah.
Radical.
And so Daniel is like, again, he is in his feelings, and he's like, "Oh, you could go if you wanted to go. That wouldn't even matter to me. I wouldn't even care." And Allie is just sort of like, "If I wanted to go, I would have gone. Get in the car, Daniel. Like, we are not done with our date yet." Because poor Daniel, he doesn't have self-esteem yet, and it is hard to be poor in the 80s and be mocked for being poor. It's shitty.
Yeah,
It's shitty.
It sucks. It does suck.
Yeah, and he still has much to learn. For example, how to sand Miyagi's porch.
Yep.
Because that is the next thing he's doing. And then he is in fact painting Mr. Miyagi's fence.
Both sides.
Both sides. Yep. You get the wrists, the small ones. You do the left hand.
Don't forget to breathe.
Big ones. Yep. He's doing a lot of manual labor. But we do get a hint that maybe all of this training and this emphasis on, balance and restraint and discipline is paying off, because once again, he comes into Mr. Miyagi's house and sees him sitting there with some chopsticks, and he's pinching at the air again. And he's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm trying to catch a fly with chopsticks," because it is said that a man who can catch a fly with chopsticks can do anything. And so, of course, he's like, "Oh, have you ever done it, Mr. Miyagi?" He's like, "No, I've never done it."
Not yet.
Not yet. I will someday, maybe. But Daniel sits down, grabs a pair of chopsticks, and just, what does he do? Immediately snags a fly out of the air. And this is
beginner's luck.
One of the only times we see Mr. Miyagi get kind of like, because he's like, you got lucky.
Yeah.
So, the movie is signaling to us that Daniel is capable of great things, even if he has not quite realized it yet.
And that Miyagi is fallible and
yes.
not this perfect teacher that I think he wants to be. Because, again, his instructions to Daniel were, "I teach, you learn. There is no middle road. You cannot halfway karate."
Yeah, and you can't ask questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are not allowed to push back on anything, which Daniel does a pretty good job of until he, is halfway through painting Mr. Miyagi's entire house and then is all of a sudden just like, "What is that?"
Did you ever think maybe I wanted to go fishing?
Yeah, Mr. Miyagi went fishing without him. One time he's putting on his Hawaiian shirt, clearly about to go out for a night on the town. He's like, "Go paint the rest of the fence, Daniel." And Daniel's like, "Oh, come on.
Come back tomorrow. Come back early."
Yeah.
That's what he tells him every time.
Eventually Daniel does get to the point where he's like, "Come on."
Yeah.
I've just been doing manual labor for you, and you said you were going to teach me karate. I have to go to this tournament. I'm going to get killed there. Why haven't you taught me anything?
Yeah. And by the by, the tournament is less than 2 months away when they throw the challenge down. There is not enough time. This is maybe a fine training method to build some strength over time, and, that's okay, but, you need more time than a month.
Not in a month. Yeah, so Daniel is, confronting him, and this is where Miyagi reveals that, in fact, he has been teaching Daniel karate. Specifically, he has been teaching him defensive moves.
Right.
Because then he just starts trying to punch at Daniel and is like, "Okay, do the wax on, wax off thing."
Mm-hmm.
And he is able to deflect all of the different blows
Yep.
that Mr. Miyagi is trying to land on him.
Only after Miyagi reveals his devil magic once more.
Oh, yeah.
When Daniel says, I can't even move my arm. And then Miyagi just reaches in, grabs his shoulder under his shirt, and Daniel goes, ah! And
then it's magically healed.
Starts doing arm circles.
Well,
how did you do that?
He claps his hands and then rubs them together.
Oh, yeah. He's got to summon his...
you got to summon the magic. Jesus Christ. Yeah, I mean, listen, we'll talk about it later,
indeed.
but, jeez. Okay, but now we get to karate training in earnest. So Daniel starts learning balance by going into the ocean up to his neck and trying to stand up. And then while he's doing that, he looks back on the beach and sees Mr. Miyagi standing on this like wooden post doing some kind of one-legged kick. Which when he asks about it, it's called the crane technique. It's supposedly a kick you can't possibly defend against.
If done properly, it has no defense.
No defense.
But we see in the third freaking movie that it does have a defense.
Well, yeah.
Daniel can't land it on Beefcake Majik or whatever his name is.
We're not talking about Karate Kid 3.
Fine. It's the worst one.
And here we see some just like California redneck racists drinking beer and putting their beer bottles on Mr. Miyagi's truck. And he just karate chops the top of all the beer bottles off like he's fucking Miss Piggy. Just like, boom, knocks them all off. And then the racists are all like, whoa, and leave him alone.
And like, that's cool and everything. But hey, Miyagi, you just sure did break a bunch of glass on the beach, man. Like,
yeah, come on,
not
man.
Not cool, dude.
In front of Daniel, who's not wearing shoes. Like, come on. Anyway, Daniel's like, whoa, that was awesome. When am I going to learn how to punch? And Miyagi's like, no, balance is more important.
Yeah.
Because, in his mentality, he is still trying to impart to Daniel that the goal is still to avoid fighting. It is not a fighting technique so much as a way to avoid fighting. But you know who it is okay to fight? The 1%. Like Allie's parents.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we're about to get to the scene that makes me the most mad in this whole movie. Because Allie is at the country club with her parents, dancing with her dad, which is a rich people thing, I guess. And they're trying to be like, I really think that you ought to give Johnny Lawrence another chance. You forget about that boy from Reseda that you were seeing. You should go back to Johnny. He's a really nice guy. And she's like, no, I don't like Johnny. I don't want to be with Johnny anymore. And like, not telling her parents exactly why she doesn't want to be around Johnny, but she
shouldn't have to.
You shouldn't have to. Again, why are you so invested in who your teenager is dating? Why do you care? It's gross. But
why not ask a follow-up question anyway if you're so invested?
What happened with Johnny? Why don't you want to be around him anymore? And be like, he keeps trying to kill people. It's scary.
They don't care about Allie. They don't care about her safety. They care about their legacy in the abstract.
And their reputation at the country club.
Right.
And presumably Johnny's father is someone powerful and they want to save face in front of him, blah, blah, blah. And so they pass Allie off to Johnny on the dance floor, and she tries to like walk away, but he's like, no, like continue the dance, like don't embarrass me in this very public place, like we're gonna finish the dance together.
He restrains her, and says, can we just please finish the dance?
And he says, can we call a truce? To which she replies, I am not a war. And while this is happening, Daniel is like trying to sneak it. Well, she has stood Daniel up is part of the problem.
They were supposed to meet at 9:30 or something. He's waited 10 or 15 minutes. He's not going to go in the front door of the country club because he can't.
Yeah,
and
he
so
sneaks in through the kitchen.
Yeah. Which I don't know why he did that.
Yeah, I don't know what he is hoping to do here, but basically he's just sort of like, where is she? I'm going to go and find her. So he's in the kitchen of the country club and he's looking through a window out into this like dance floor when Allie does not see him, but Johnny does. And so what else would you do in that situation if not forcibly kiss a woman who has already multiple times tried to both get away from you physically and tell you she doesn't want to interact with you? And of course, Daniel, in true like teenage boy misunderstanding, is just like immediately like, well, she must like him, and so he turns to leave, but then he walks into the guy who's holding the tray. Spaghetti goes everywhere.
So much spaghetti. Covered with spaghetti.
Just covered in spaghetti, which again feels like a little bit aggressive towards Italians.
A little bit.
Why does he have to why couldn't it have been, I don't know.
Right in his meatballs.
Just a rice dish, I don't know.
Right in the bolognese.
Come on. And so everyone, again, in the 80s is the meanest possible person. So everyone in the room just like turns and points and laughs and ha 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 ha. Isn't this funny that this strange person got hurt and covered in spaghetti?
And by the way, none of them knew who it was. They just assumed that two servers fell down in the kitchen because one of the other, like the other person,
the only one who saw him.
Yeah, the other person was a server that was carrying the spaghetti, and this whole country crub, just like. This whole country grub, all of these country grubs just start pointing and laughing at the help for making a mistake. Like,
Yeah.
Kill them all. Kill them all.
They're terrible. And as Daniel is running away and Allie does finally see him and is like, oh no, he saw that, that's bad. And then Johnny tries to like pull her back and she just decks him.
Oh yeah.
And it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And then what do her parents do? Just immediately go to Johnny's side like, oh no. Why would you do such a thing to such a... As if you didn't just stand there and watch him assault her and do nothing.
Well, and Daniel's covered in bolognese.
Yeah. And he thinks that she doesn't like him anymore, and now his feelings are hurt.
Even worse, he thinks that she's gone back to Johnny, and all of this talk of hers about being different and really caring about him and not caring about wealth is all just BS, because there she is in the country club making out with her rich boyfriend.
Yeah. And it doesn't occur to him that, like, maybe there is more to that story.
Right.
But he runs away, and he goes to see Mr. Miyagi, and Mr. Miyagi is not having a good night. He is already drunk by the time Daniel finds him. He is wearing his old military uniform, and he is singing to a portrait of a woman. And he says he's singing the Japanese blues because it's the anniversary of Mr. Miyagi and his wife. But it is not a good anniversary, I'm afraid. He shows Daniel this photo of her when she is pregnant with their first child. And he sort of starts drunkenly stumbling around his house and imitating these, orders as he, as Lieutenant Miyagi showing up, reporting for duty, sir, I'm here to do my service. And as he's sort of stumbling through this story, Daniel figures out that Mr. Miyagi was a soldier in the Second World War. He was off fighting for the American military in the German front voluntarily, as far as we can tell. And while he was doing that, his wife was sent to an internment camp where she died in childbirth. And the baby also died, unfortunately. And Mr. Miyagi, after imparting this, passes out on the bed, and Daniel is kind of trying to tuck him in. And he finds this, I think it's like a telegram or something in his hand where it's like, sorry, you couldn't get the doctor to her in time. Yeah. And he's sort of looking through the items that Mr. Miyagi has on his table, and there's a Medal of Valor just kind of shoved in a box down at the bottom.
It's another sort of cruel irony that this film gives us, kind of like the sign on the high school of justice, peace, toleration. I always get those first two words wrong. I don't know what it is. Fine. Toleration. But to give this man a Medal of Valor, but to take his wife and child and allow them to die in such an awful way in an internment camp is just...
Yeah, and it's interesting. I know we said we weren't going to talk about the other Karate Kid movie with Jackie Chan. And
oh, yeah.
They try to do something similar in that movie where the Jackie Chan character's wife and family died in a car accident, and he keeps rebuilding the car they died in and then breaking it apart again and then rebuilding it again. And that's a much more sort of relatable type of trauma. That is the sort of thing that that could happen to anyone. It's not a specific story connected to your heritage, whereas Mr. Miyagi in this movie, that's such a specific type of trauma that really literally could only have happened to a very, very small subset of people.
Yeah. Well, at least in America, this has happened time and time again to various racial and ethnic groups.
Certainly, but the specific
these
World War II service, knowing how the American mythos talks about World War II and what it meant to be a soldier in that time, and how all of those people are due so much respect and those things. Yeah. Well, for a subset of them, some of whom only joined the army as a way to get out of internment camps themselves, and then knew that their families were at the mercy of an incredibly hostile government. And it's something that the propaganda machine tried so hard not to talk about, and still to this day tries so hard not to be a blight on the record of the U.S. military's involvement in World War II.
And what does that respect and honor even mean? It's
what does a Medal of Honor mean when you were only allowed to not be held in captivity because you volunteered to try to give your life, and they took your wife and child anyway?
And this is such a good contrast to the scene right before, because it's here's this thing that should be a prized possession, but Miyagi treats it like it's a trinket. He just keeps it in a box. We would have never known that he had a Medal of Valor, because unlike the country club weirdos, like, he's not obsessed with the materialism of the world. What he's obsessed with and what he keeps coming back to is the loss of this woman that he loved and the potential to have a child, like firstborn American Miyagi.
Yeah.
You know, and like, not for this abstract sense of legacy, but because he knows what it means to share a special bond with a father. Like, we've heard him invoke that multiple times in like this lineage of the Miyagis, and that was taken from him.
Yeah, and we see, I mean, Daniel doesn't ever, like, you know, he never, like, sits down with Miyagi and makes him talk about this again. But, at the end of the scene, he, like, bows to him, and that's an understanding of stakes. I mean, that's the change for Daniel, where it finally comes home to him of, like, this is why this man is not teaching me how to be aggressive.
Yeah, it's not something that Daniel feels like is necessary to, like, pull out of him. Miyagi confided as much as he wanted to confide in that moment. And most importantly, Daniel has a deeper understanding of this person as a man who has lived a life of love and loss and trauma, and who has reasons for doing the weird things that he does.
Yeah, well, in the next scene, which is Daniel's birthday, we see, like, this level of maturity of Daniel's understanding where Miyagi gives him this, it's a gi. Is that how they say it?
Yeah, it's a gi.
It's a gi with a bonsai tree on it for his birthday, and he tells him, like, oh, that the design on the back was sewn by Mrs. Miyagi. And Daniel's like, if you ever want this back, I'll understand.
Yeah. Daniel says that about the patch because I think he intuits that that is a much more valuable artifact to Miyagi than a Medal of freaking Valor. Like, and that's kind of wild, right?
Yeah, like, and that is where I think Daniel understands his own role in this relationship. This is not a service that he is paying for the same way that you would go to a school and pay to take classes. Like, this means something more to Mr. Miyagi than just like, well, the kid wanted to know the karate moves, so I showed him how to do them.
No,
like,
I think Miyagi makes it clear he's never taught anyone before.
Yeah.
And Miyagi's an old dude. He's got a lot of knowledge. Why hasn't he taught anything? Yeah. Well, because, as he's told us,
he lost the person he wanted most to teach.
Exactly. And he learned karate from his father. It's a thing he's expecting to pass on to his son. Or daughter in the fourth movie.
The other gift that he gives Daniel for his birthday is one of the vintage cars. He just takes him out front and is like,
choose.
Take your pick. Pick whichever one you want. Because Daniel is 16 now. He has his driver's license. And Mr. Miyagi is like, just remember that a license never replaces your eyes, ears, or brain. Yeah. Your whole life needs to be in balance.
I love this scene because, like, to me, it harkens right back to, he says, karate is in your head and heart, not in your belt. In this scene, it's like, hey, driving's dangerous, dude. This license that says you're allowed to do this, just like a belt is a license that says you're allowed to compete in a tournament, that doesn't mean anything. What matters is what comes from within you, to harken back to the tree. You can make it this beautiful thing that grows, or you can project something awful and violent into the world.
Yeah, just because you...
Or you can cause another 4-car pileup, you little turd.
Good Lord. And the button on this scene is Daniel being like, I think you're the best friend I've ever had in my whole life, Mr. Miyagi. And Mr. Miyagi says, you're pretty okay, too. Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah. I mean, he's pretty overt here, too. Where he's like, yeah, life must be balanced. And he sees this pretty picture of Daniel and Allie that they took at golf and stuff, and like hands it back to him. And he's like,
go
balance.
Get her, champ.
Balance. Go find your balance, dude.
Yeah. Because now Daniel has a cool vintage car to impress Allie with.
Yeah.
And it initially, of course, does not impress her at all, because ever since the incident at the country club, Daniel has just been avoiding her and has not given her the opportunity to explain what happened. And so she's like, all right, screw you, buddy. If you are, you just want to think the worst of me, fine. He goes back and meets her at golf and stuff and is trying to be like, hey, come and talk to me. And she's like, no, all of the problems here have arisen from you and your insecurities and your unwillingness to talk to me about things. Like, I never cared that you didn't have as much money as me. You cared more about that.
Right.
Like, I wanted to work through the Johnny thing together and you didn't, whatever. You're on your own. And he's like, well, you tried to use Johnny to make me jealous. And she like storms away. And her friend is like, you're an idiot. Did you follow up on what happened after he kissed her? And he's like, no, I left. And she's like, well.
How do you think she got that brace on her wrist?
Yeah.
Wasn't from painting her nails, you know.
Yeah. It's just like, yeah, she punched him, you idiot. Yeah. You maybe shouldn't make so many assumptions about this person that you supposedly like. So he does go and he's like, oh, gosh. Oh, shucks. So he goes and apologizes to her and is like, hey, the tournament's tomorrow. You gotta come with me. And she's like, yeah, okay. If things don't go well, we can just leave early.
Yeah, well, that's why I wish we had that sound effect from all the, like, sitcoms in the 80s and 90s where the audience goes,
yeah, it was just sort of like, we could go have sex in your car if things go bad. Like,
yeah.
Okay, Allie.
Sweet.
And he even lets her drive the car because it's the 1980s and ladies can drive now.
That's literally what he says. He's literally like, hey, it's the 80s.
Yeah. She's like, oh, you trust me to drive your car? Hey, it's the 80s.
Hilarious.
Oh, my God. So onward to the tournament. It's very funny to me. This is one of my favorite things, which is when you bring like two people from different social groups together and they're just immediately in cahoots with each other. Mm-hmm. Allie and Mr. Miyagi are just like immediately on the same page. They are in cahoots completely.
They get it.
Because first of all, they have to lie to get Daniel into the tournament and be like, oh yeah, he's a black belt.
Yeah, sure.
Totally, for sure. And then
he steals the black belt.
Yeah, Mr. Miyagi is like blocking the guy at the table to be like, oh, you need to correct the spelling of my name, and gesturing to Allie to steal a belt out of the bag. And they also lie about Mr. Miyagi not being able to speak English and be like, well, she's my translator. You have to let her come down to the floor with me or I won't be able to understand what my coach is saying.
Yeah.
Pretty lax security at this child karate tournament, which is bad because half of the people competing are full fucking psychopaths.
Yep.
And it's good that they brought Allie along because she is the only person here somehow who knows the rules of a karate tournament. I guess she studied overnight.
She did her homework. Yeah. Well, actually, you come to find out that the All Valley Under 18 Karate Championship is like the talk of the town. Like, everyone is there.
So many people are here to watch these 12-year-olds kick each other. It's out of control.
No, it's like karate is huge in the valley, as you find out in Cobra Kai. But like literally everyone in this area goes to this thing every year. It's so
weird.
Every year.
It's so strange. But Mr. Miyagi's only advice to Daniel is don't get hit.
Yeah.
Stay balanced. Defend yourself.
Yeah.
And you'll end up getting points one way or the other. And Daniel is doing pretty well. Mm-hmm. The problem is the Cobra Kai boys are also doing pretty well.
Yeah.
But it's okay because Daniel is the best around.
You're the best around. Nothing's ever gonna keep you down.
As always, with sports movies, it is totally unclear how this scoring works, what the rules are, how it's being judged, what counts as a point, what counts as not a point, what's illegal, what's not illegal.
It's extremely frustrating as a martial artist to watch, and you're just like, now wait a minute, that was a takedown, and he gave him an elbow to the face, and that was a point, but then you just punch him, and like that's a foul. I don't understand.
Yeah, how does any of this work? So all these different Cobra Kais are going up, but they're no match for Daniel's painting skills.
Yeah.
Until Dutch shows up.
Oh, no.
And Dutch breaks Daniel's ribs. And then an extremely uncomfortable interaction happens. So one of the boys there to fight is Bobby, who you will remember as the one who didn't want to kill Daniel on Halloween. That's Bobby's big thing, is he's like, hey, man, I don't want to do a murder right now.
Yeah.
But
he's had enough, man.
But his Sensei John Kreese, is like, you need to take this guy out of commission. He's embarrassing ice. And Bobby's like, oh, come on, man. Like, I if I just fight him following the rules, I think I'll be able to beat him. Like, don't you believe in me, Coach? But Coach Sensei, does not believe in him.
I'll be disqualified.
Yeah, because
Did you hear what I said?
Yeah, he's like, you need to injure him so badly that he has to quit. And Bobby is like, I don't want to do that.
Yes, Sensei.
But John is very scary, and so he has already shown that he's okay with forcing these kids to hurt each other, and probably is pretty okay with hurting them himself. So Bobby goes out.
What he does in the scene is like a flying sidekick aimed downward at the outside of Daniel's knee, which is and should be a foul. It's a horrible way to kick someone in the leg. You can really mess them up. It looks goofy in this movie, and it does down Daniel pretty hard.
Yeah, and this is also another one of those very difficult scenes to watch, because as soon as Daniel goes down, Bobby like drops to the floor and is like, I'm so sorry, Daniel, I didn't want to do this to you, I'm so sorry, and he gets like carted away while he's just like tearfully apologizing to Daniel. I don't think Bobby's gonna go back to Cobra Kai. I think Bobby might be done.
Well, that's why I'm so upset. I'm like, in that later scene, the dude that shouts, like, put him in a body bag. It really looks like Bobby, but I guess that's the point. They all look the same.
It's not Bobby. But now Daniel is very hurt, and it doesn't look like he's going to be able to continue. You know, he's in the locker room, and his mom is like, it's okay. I'm still proud of you. You did your best. And Ellie is like, oh, you would have won if Bobby hadn't cheated.
And by the way, this is the semifinals, so Bobby's been disqualified. That means that Daniel should be going up against Johnny in the finals now.
Yes.
If he can continue.
And here Daniel is like, Mr. Miyagi, did I even ever have a chance at winning this? Like,
win, lose, no matter.
Yeah, Mr. Miyagi says, you don't worry about that. You don't need to fight anymore. It's fine. But Daniel is like, no, I didn't do what I came here to do. What I came here to do is tell Johnny Lawrence to get off my back.
Yeah.
And now what I have shown is that if his friends hit me enough, I will go away.
Yeah.
And that's not acceptable to me. He came here to get respect, and that is what it means to him in that moment, to defend himself, because he hasn't done the thing that will get them to stop hurting him yet and stop hurting people that he cares about. Miyagi sort of realizes that a little bit of conflict now in this like semi-controlled space might prevent more conflict later.
So he uses his shadow devil magic one last
time. He claps his hands and rubs them together and puts them on Daniel's leg and heals him just enough that he can like stand back up. And Daniel faces off against Johnny in the final because, of course, Johnny also made it to the final. The narrative demanded it. It would have been really lackluster if he'd gotten knocked out in round one.
He's the two-time defending champion. He's won this tournament 2 years prior.
Wow.
He's the best in the valley.
He's the best around.
He's the best around. Nothing's ever gonna keep you down. Except Daniel.
And as always, Johnny starts the fight fully out to kill him, as always. But now Daniel actually knows how to defend himself. And so he is holding his... Is this when Sensei John tells him to sweep the leg, or was that earlier? I wrote it in my notes twice.
No, this is when he tells... So that's the thing. Like, he tells Bobby to take him out of commission.
Okay.
And then now that Daniel has this injured leg, he tells Johnny to do a thing that won't score a point, but is legal, to sweep the leg, to target the leg that is imbalanced and can't hold weight.
Okay.
Or rather, to target the one that can hold weight, because he can really only stand on one leg. So if you take it out from under him, he's going to fall down.
Yeah, so he tries to do that. That's apparently legal. Curb stomping appears to also just be legal, because he just is like trying to step on his head.
Yeah.
It's very
Daniel
upsetting.
has to like roll around on the floor for a little bit.
Yeah, but you can't keep a good man down. And the good thing about Daniel's training is that he kind of only learned how to do one kick, but it is a kick you could do with just the one leg.
He didn't learn it. He
intuited it.
Yeah.
Yeah, when he needed it most, the crane kick came to him.
Yeah, exactly.
He executes a perfect crane kick, winning the tournament, beating Johnny, and the sort of last shot of the movie is Johnny handing him I almost said statue, the trophy for winning the tournament.
And
he says, "You're all right, LaRusso," because Johnny has a very short memory, apparently, and he got kicked hard enough that it changed him.
Yeah.
So
like a lightning bolt to his forehead.
And that is the end of the movie. The credits roll.
Woo! And that movie in a vacuum, that ending of Johnny just doing the full 180 after getting kicked in the head, pretty dumb, honestly.
Not entirely convincing.
No. And I wish, this is the only bit of Karate Kid Part 2 I want to talk about.
Okay.
That movie opens directly after Daniel gets the trophy. They go into the locker room. They chill for a little bit. But then what we see is Sensei John Kreese taking the second place trophy of Johnny and breaking it over his knee. They're out in the parking lot. John Kreese is starting to get physical with the Cobra Kai students, calling them a loser, specifically Johnny, calling them weak. And this is when Miyagi and Daniel start to walk out. I think after that scene, it would have been a lot more believable to give Johnny's character some time to reflect and be like, okay, maybe this Ralph Macchio guy isn't the villain. It's actually my horrible teacher.
Yeah.
And then he has to see that played out in real time because, of course, John Kreese picks a fight with Miyagi, and Miyagi wins by doing the sort of Toro thing and letting John Kreese punch his bare fist through car windows only to get bloodied up. And then again, it's sort of like a redirect flippy move using his own energy against him. And what does he do in the final moment when he like rears up his, knife hand to bring down on the throat of John Kreese, but lowers it down, grabs his nose and goes, honk, honk.
Yeah.
As if to say, like, yeah, actually, mercy does take a lot of strength. You're teaching these kids something that will get them killed for honor or valor or some stupid nonsense that really doesn't mean anything, when actually what means something is life and golf and stuff and, like having a girlfriend or whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Balance.
You freaking idiot. Yeah. And so, like, I just kind of wish, I always forget that that's not part of the original movie. It's the beginning of the sequel. But I think the writers were just like, hey, it was kind of weird how Johnny just like gave him the trophy and was like, hey, we're friends now. Like that's
yeah, it
we
is
ran
a
out
little
of time.
strange. But that is also kind of an 80s thing of like, you teach somebody their lesson and then they've learned it.
Yeah.
They're better now.
Yeah, you're bully proof now, bud.
Happily ever after.
Yeah.
Not true for Johnny Lawrence, unfortunately, but we have been recording for a long time, so I think we are maybe going to have to talk about what happens to Johnny Lawrence as his life progresses sometime in the future, specifically
Next
2
time.
weeks from now.
Next time. Gadget.
Yeah.
Tune into Cobra Kai if you want to learn more.
Yeah, you can if you want to. We'll talk about it a little bit. I have told Spencer we are allowed to briefly sojourn into Cobra Kai.
Oh, Kelcee!
Yeah, I'm
Please.
not watching 3 seasons.
It's so good, y'all.
I'm sure it's fine.
It really is good.
I mean...
There's more strong women. Hey, guess what? Ms. LaRusso comes back.
Hell yeah.
It's the same actress.
Does she have a better car?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, I think so.
There's no way that car's
Everyone
still
has-
running.
Well,
Doesn't her
Uncle
son
Louie.
sell cars?
yeah, he does.
Isn't that the thing that...
Yeah.
Yeah. Somehow it does bum me out a little bit that Daniel grows up to sell cars.
Well, he's
but-
really good at it. He's the best in the valley. He's the best around. Okay.
All right. So look forward to that. In 2 weeks, we will talk more about Karate Kid with a little dash of Cobra Kai.
And a lot of trees.
Yeah. And
It's not a drug reference. I have a lot to say about the bonsai trees.
okay. So we will dip back into this compassionate conversation about masculinity in media next time. Do you have a button?
Listen first.
Goodbye.
Listen hard. No mercy.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.